Наш робочий день.
Dear colleagues, we start our working day, and the topic of our current briefing is life in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, how the DNR settles into the state. And I invite Paul Gogo, Liberation journalist.
Working most of the time for the newspaper Libération, French newspaper Libération. I spent most of my time in Donbass during the last year, and most of this time in Donetsk. So I saw the evolution of the situation in Donetsk, and I saw the situation going from the first demonstration to the war. And I want to talk about Donetsk today because when we watch Ukraine media, we see some image from the war, from the front line, from the contact line. But I think that the DPR reached now another level in their volunteer to create a state. So first, I want to describe you the last thing I saw in Donetsk. How is the life in some places in Donetsk? So I don't forget that the humanitarian situation is really complicated, that when you go in Donetsk, the streets are empty, the shops, most of the shops are closed, the price, most of people now pay with ruble, the price increased a lot, now it's very expensive to live in Donetsk. But in another way, there is still some people who have enough money to have almost normal life in Donetsk. And for example, when you go in one of the main streets called Pushkinskaya Street, it's a kind of a pedestrian street where there is a park and a road, but it's a big park. And this street is always full of people. It's always full of kids. It's always full of families. There is a lot of beautiful flowers, a lot of beautiful fontaine, big fontaine. There is a rock band playing music in the street. There is a full restaurant. All the restaurants in the street are open, and they are full every day. So that's right that in the background you still can hear the shelling from the Donetsk airport. But at least there is a lot of people who forget that there is the war there. Like in Kiev, in another way, sometimes we sometimes forget that the country can be in war. If you go down to the street, you come to another park, another big park. This park was rebuilt for the 2012 Euro football championships, and this park is huge. It's a really big park, and it's the same thing every day, every weekend. There is a lot of family who are coming in this park. I describe you this situation because I think that it's not some images that we imagine when we are in Kiev. And each time I write what I see in Donetsk, on the social network, for example, I know that a lot of Ukrainians are always surprised to see that there is a lot of people who have an almost normal life in Donetsk. And when we watch Ukrainian media, we see that it's still a question in Poroshenko's speeches and in media. We see that it's still a question to take back Donbass territories and sometimes even Crimea territory. And it's strange for me because when you go in the front line, most of the time it's really, really calm. It's not the best example today because in some days we have an increase of a fight in the east. But it's increase of the provocation. It's not attack. The goal of this attack, of this provocation, are not to take back some territories. It's one more provocation. And if you look the political calendar, and particularly the political calendar of Russia, there is always, or most of the time, a link between this separatist provocation on the front line and this political calendar. So Ukraine respects the Minsk agreement. Ukraine tried to respect the ceasefire, and it's a good thing because in the most difficult time I spent in Donetsk, the shelling were really heavy, and most of people touched by this shelling are civilians. If it's Ukrainian shelling, if it's separatist shelling, the first victims are civilians. And most of the victims of this war are civilians. So it's a good thing to respect this ceasefire, but in another way, we all begin to understand that if there is no more fight in East Ukraine, it also means that Ukraine is in some point losing the war. Because DPR, yes, they dream to be able to take some more territory, but in another way, I feel that they use this time without war to try to build their country, their own country. And it looks that it works, because they use, like Russia use big propaganda, they use their big propaganda too. And so they understood that the time is playing with them, with Russia, but the time is playing against Ukraine. So I want to give you an example of how is working this propaganda in Donetsk with something I saw last time I was there. It was in July. There is a new NGO called Youth Republic, and this NGO is led by young people from DNR, and the goal of this NGO is to create some event to make burn in the head and mind of people who live in DPR the love of DPR. And when I was in this, so I participated to one of these events, and we invited 10 families from Donetsk. It was big families with a lot of kids, and grandmother was here too. And the goal was to give them a diploma to thank them for their loyalty to DPR. And they show some, for me, this kind of ceremony are a kind of funny, because it's like really primitive propaganda with music, action music, and a big voice, and really a kind of Soviet show. And they show some little films to introduce all the families. In these films, we could see first the grandmother crying when she was with in the background sad music. She was crying when she was explaining that the Ukrainian army tried to kill her and all his family. And then we could see the family walking in the street in front of their house. They were happy, they were laughing. And the song in the background was happy, and the mother came to the camera and explained to the camera, thanks to DPR, because when Ukrainian army was trying to kill our families, and we have no food, and DPR came and gave us food. And it was very primitive propaganda, but it's really interesting to see, because it looks that it worked there. And so they received this diploma of exemplar family from DPR. And we have to know that this kind of events are daily, happen every day in Donetsk. I receive every day 2 or 3 emails from DPR, from the Donetsk administration. And these emails, I've got the list of all the press conferences. They love press conferences. There is a lot of press conferences. But there is also the list of all the events organized in whole DPR, all villages, all little cities in Donetsk. And I discovered that they have a real politic of culture and sport, because they understood that with culture and sport, we can try to change the mind of people, because yes, a lot of people are pro-Russian in Donbass, but during the really difficult time of the war, when the shelling were really tense, I met a lot of people living in Donetsk who were saying, okay, we don't care if it's Ukraine, we don't care if it's the separatists, but we just want to stop the war. And I don't know if it's most of people, but a lot of people were thinking that. They were ready to go back in Ukraine if the war stopped, because it was a really difficult time. And so the separatists understood that they had to have a big politic to make them love their country, to make them be loyal to DPR. And so we organize a lot of events like that. There is a football match, there is a volleyball match. This NGO I was talking about, Youth Republic, also invite me in poem session. They invite me to come in a park, and they wanted to make a poem session, anti-USA poem session, and the goal was to write some poem against USA, and then to send this poem to the USA. It's maybe strange, but it works. So I'm not saying that Ukraine have no answer to this separatist propaganda. There is an answer. But the first example I've got of this answer it's my last travel in Slaviansk, and I was a little bit shocked by the face of its Ukraine propaganda or Ukraine communication. I don't know how to call it, because when you go on the Slaviansk city hall place, the main place of the city, ex-Lenin place, every hours the city hall play the national anthem. And I really like the Ukrainian national anthem, but when you heard that every hours, every day, I think that for people who are there, at least it could be really disturbing. And some people decided to paint yellow and blue colors everywhere in the street. It's something really common in Ukraine. And the colors of the Ukrainian flag are beautiful. But I always think that these territories were in separatist hands for some months. And if the only answer Ukraine have is to try to give, to put in their mind the color of the Ukrainian flag and the national anthem, it could be dangerous, because there is still a lot of people who are thinking about the separatists. But I also visited Mariupol, and Mariupol is different, because people from Mariupol understood that the situation is really tense, really dangerous, and I think that a lot of people living in Mariupol decided to take decision, to mobilize, to create initiatives, to develop culture, sport in Mariupol, and to develop talk with inhabitants of Mariupol, because we understood that it could be easy to take the city. But in some point, and in my position, it could be easier to take back some cities like Kramatorsk, Slaviansk, or Konstantinovka than Mariupol, because Mariupol is ready for war, and people, I think that Ukraine have at least a lot of support from people living, population living in Mariupol. So I would like to continue to explain. I really think that we reach a new step. So in this volunteer to create this, in this will to create a DPR state, and I think that one of this step is to ask to international presence, international people to leave territory, and I don't know if it's for this reason, but since some weeks now, some strange things are happening in Donetsk. First, I have to say that the separatists are now checking who are the journalists, international journalists who come in DPR. They make investigation on them, and it's more and more difficult for journalists to go there because more and more accreditation are cancelled to go there. And it's really disturbing, because we know that it's really frustrating for Ukrainian journalists, because I know that Ukrainian journalists would like to be able to go there, and it's I totally understand that, because they would like to see how it's happening there, and it's not possible for them. So international journalists are the last one to be able to see and to say what is happening there, and it looks like they want to close more and more this communication and this border. And I also want to talk about USC, because USC is also kind of it's an international presence in Donetsk, in Donbass, and maybe you saw it in the media during the last months, but there is a really weird movement burning in Donbass, in DPR and LPR, because OSCE is not anymore, it's not anymore welcome in DPR now. Some demonstrations were organized by the separatists themselves. The OSCE noticed that in Lugansk. The last demonstration in Lugansk were organized. All people came together in this demonstration, and some people were there with talkie-walkie to organize this demonstration. The last demonstration in Donetsk finished with the burning of 4 OSCE cars. And now if you read the OSCE daily OSCE statement, you can see that there is some provocation, some threat every day. There is 3 or 4 days, separatists stop OSCE car in a checkpoint, and he put in the car a bomb, non-explosive bomb, and to provoke them and to ask them to leave the territory. And they receive this kind of treatment every day. So we have a joke between journalists about OSCE because I think that OSCE is the only thing that can gather Ukrainian and separatists, because it looks that there's not so many people who like OSCE and who really understand the work of OSCE in the 2 sides. But at least there is a kind of ceasefire, there is a piece of ceasefire, if you can call it like that. And I think OSCE is not for nothing in this ceasefire. And it's still important to fight to keep this kind of ceasefire active. And if OSCE, if journalists disappear from this territory, everybody will lose. I mean, Ukraine will lose the war, but people will lose a lot. People from Donbass will lose a lot too, even if people are supporting the separatists. They have the right to have a voice in the media. They have the right to be shown in the media, and we have to know what is happening there. And that's why the ceasefire is really important, and the presence of the journalists and OSCE is really important in this territory, for my point. So we'll see how is evaluating the situation there, but I think we should really keep an eye on OSCE. I'm not a big fan of OSCE, but I really think they try to make their job like they can, and they have a lot of difficulties to make their job. And so we should continue to check their job and to fight to keep the ceasefire active, even if with the ceasefire it will be more difficult for Ukraine. Thank you.
Шановні колеги, журналісти, в кого є...
Dear colleagues, journalists, do you have any questions? You're welcome. Lina Shitko, Radio Liberty. There was a question, there was an indication in the topic of the press briefing how the DNR is formed in its state structures. Can you tell us about any state organizations like housing offices or passport offices? Can you tell us about this? The question is repeated in French.
They created when the separatists came is bureaucracy and all the organization, all the administrative things that a state can have. I think they copy that on Russian state administrative things. And there is a minister for everything in Donetsk. And there is a lot of people working in these ministers. So yeah, it's the main goal of them, of separatists, is to copy a state and to look like a state. So they have minister, public service are working now, and hospitals, school are working now. I met someone working in university, Donetsk University, a teacher, and she's not so pro-Russian, but she told me that she's more paid now than before with Ukraine. I still don't understand where come from the money she received, but at least she looks happy to live there. And they understood that they have to fight for that to keep people living there, and they do everything for that. So it's not so difficult to copy a state. At least you have minister, you have a kind of organization. You have your own propaganda, so you can show what you want in your own propaganda. And they show the humanitarian convoy coming. They show that they give food to people, that they fight for people. They also show that it's really interesting. I forgot to talk about it, but for example, the ATB, we talked about it yesterday here already. But the ATB supermarket are now separatist supermarket. They bought it, and there is some products, some separatist product too. There is Coca-Cola, separatist Coca-Cola called Real Cola that you can buy in most of the supermarket there. You have separatist cigarettes. In the streets, you can buy a separatist flag everywhere. It's interesting because there is still, I was talking about Slavyansk and the Ukrainian flag in the streets, and there is still this kind of Ukrainian flag in the Donetsk streets. It was not a priority, I think, for them to paint a separatist flag everywhere, but maybe it will come soon. But it's a lot of little things like that that they do to at least feel like in a real country. The only things, and it's very important things, is that even when you live in the center of Donetsk, you can still hear the shelling from the Donetsk airport because it's the hottest fight spot, and it's for me. You can't have a normal life when you live under shelling like that. Even if the bombs are not falling on you, when you are in the restaurant and you hear a big explosion. Me, I still have this little movement like, oh, it's a very strange place. And during the night, shelling are most often really heavier than during the day. And even when you live in the center of Donetsk, you still can have your windows moving because of the shelling. So life is not normal there, I can say that. And the humanitarian situation is still catastrophic. And we can say that DPR is a state, but they do everything to make it look like a state. That's my point.
Is there some problem? Does people have a problem with getting in some papers from these ministers? I mean, people used to think that it's okay, they can go to some minister and get their paper they need, and they understand that it's the way it works. So there's no need to go to Ukraine back or something. Can you tell me about the people's mind?
Yeah.
What they have.
It's not less complicated than in Ukraine when you won't have paper, to be honest. But no. But it's a joke. But yes, it's for example, I met some foreign students who still continue to study in Donetsk, and they came in Donetsk with a Ukrainian visa, and now they are looking for what to do because their Ukrainian visa expired. So they tried to go in the DPR administration to ask, can you ask to Ukraine to make me a visa to leave the place? And separatists say, oh, we don't have diplomatic relation with Ukraine. So they asked to Russia, and Russia helped them to make visa and paper to leave or to go through Russia to leave. And it's the same thing for their diploma. They are waiting for their diploma. They are studying medicine. And DPR said that they will have a Russian diploma and a DPR diploma, but they are still waiting for this diploma. So we don't know if they will have these papers. And I know that people who want humanitarian aid have to go in one office in Donetsk, and it's really, really complicated things. You can wait for hours. You have a lot of paper to fill. And I know that it's not working every time to have your humanitarian aid. So, yeah, they create bureaucracy, and it's not less complicated than in Russia or at some point in Ukraine.
Отже, будь ласка, в кого ще є запитання?
Any other additional questions? Yes.
Question.
De rien.
Could you, as the guy from the inside, right, as you go to Eastern Ukraine from time to time, could you give us a few points on what are the main wishes and desires of usual people living on the occupied territories? Do they still care about what side of the fence to take? Should they be a part of Russia or Ukraine, or just like simple wishes as what to eat and when this terrible war is going to end? Thank you.
Since the beginning, it's very difficult to understand what people want, because I think that a lot of people also wanted different things. Some of people were dreaming about Novorossiya, some of people are dreaming to join Russia, some people just dreaming to be independent, some people dreaming to be more recognized by Kiev. And all these feelings evaluated during the conflict. I told you before about this time where the shelling were really tense there, and people I met before who were pro-Russian, who were fighting for pro-Russian, began to tell me, okay, pro-Russian or separatists or Ukraine, we don't care, we just want to stop the war. And if you were pushing there a little bit, they were ready to say, yeah, okay, we just need to change something in Ukraine, we will not be against to stay in Ukraine. But we just want to keep Donbass like we want, and we want to they have their own idea of Donbass. And then the ceasefire came, and life began to be, because it's natural for every people, every human, to always try to keep your life normal. So when the ceasefire began, a lot of people you know, they have their own media. There is Novorossiya TV, there is Novorossiya Gazeta, and things like that. And I remember grandmother I met different times in the conflict, and I remember this time where she was thinking, okay, I don't care about all this situation, I just don't want the war. And last time I met her, she was watching Novorossiya TV, and she was explaining me, no, I want to stay with the separatists. They are not talking about joining Russia. They are a little bit talking about Novorossiya still, but it looks very difficult to create for them. But they want to be independent. I think most of the people who stayed there decided to stay in Donetsk, not all, but most of them. And the ones who decided to stay there want first to be independent, and then to have a really big link with Russia, Russian with Russia. And they've got it because now all the food is Russian in Donetsk, most of the food. Most of the money is rubles. And yes, I forgot what.
Будь ласка.
Hi, Christina Chamakina from Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Thank you very much for your presentation on DPR. I was just wondering, do you think there is still a chance, even though there is Russian rubles, there are many Russian products already in DPR, is there still a way for Ukrainian side to, let's say, return the minds of people? Because, well, Novorossiya is obviously a myth that people buy very easily. And do you think there's still a chance for Ukrainian side to destroy the myth and just return the minds?
I remember that I read something about Ukraine, that there is, I forgot how we call it, but a broadcast thing for TV located in Kramatorsk, and this place to broadcast the Ukrainian TV on the Donbass territory was destroyed. And they are talking about fix this thing since months and months. And now in DPR and also in Ukrainian territory, in some places, you have only Russian media. You can only watch Russian media. So I think Ukraine understood, Ukraine is not stupid, Ukraine government is not stupid. They understood that they have to communicate too, because they know that in front of them they have the big Russia propaganda. It's something very huge. And now the local propaganda or communication DPR propaganda, so they have to fight against that. And Yeah, it was a little bit the point of my speech, is that I feel that it's the Ukraine communication or Ukraine answer to this propaganda looks really weak for me. And in Mariupol, for example, I noticed that all the initiatives took to try to create cultural events and everything are always coming from people, not from government, always most of the time, coming from people and not from government or ministry. So there is things planned for this area, but it looks really weak in front of the big propaganda that they have in separatist sides.
Якщо більше ні в кого немає запитань, ще є одне запитання, коротке.
There is another question, please be brief.
Today you told us that the humanitarian situation in DPR, LPR is just horrible, and yesterday your colleague Pierre Sautreuil told us about this story of humanitarian aid simply sold out in these shops. Does the separatist state do everything possible to help to the people in need, to help those who suffer from all these unpleasant events? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they do everything because they say in their media that they do everything, but in the fact, yes, it's. I don't think it's working like that. I wrote a story. It was in last November. I met someone working in Donetsk administration, and he was a little bit in charge of economy of DPR, but it's everybody's in charge of everything in this place. And he explained me first that they had no money at all. So that's why when I meet people working in hospital or university and they tell me that they earn a lot of money, I still don't understand where it's coming from this money. But they were not rich at all in November, so they are now. He told me, you know, this Russian convoy will come from Russia. When they come, most of the food is some food is going to hospital and schools, but most of the food is going to the soldiers. And in this convoy, you also have military clothes. It's Russia, and he showed me one of his clothes because he received one as a gift. And he showed me one of his clothes, and it's clothes I saw a lot of time on the front line with the separatists. And he told me, yes, Russia it's nice. They offer them military clothes too. So I will not say that no, they are not doing everything. And I think that the Akhmetov humanitarian convoy helped them a lot because it's something really important. He sent a lot of food in Donetsk, and a lot of people are eating thanks to that. So the separatists give a number of people who receive, I forgot this number, but it's a huge number of people receiving weekly the humanitarian food. I don't know if it's a real number, but it looks very big. And when you meet people, even if they have food, they don't have medicine and they don't have money. Sometimes their house or flat to fix, to repair. So at least it's not enough for them to live in a normal way. And when the winter will come back, in some cities the winter will still be really, really difficult for civilians, I think.
Якщо немає більше запитань, ми
If there are no further questions, then we will sum up with this, and the next briefing will be in 20 minutes. Це ваше.